Fairy Tail is full of major events and huge revelations, whether you loved them or hated them. But by far the most important is the moment when Lucy joins the Fairy Tail Guild. As the main character of the story, we're seeing everything that happens over her shoulder. So how would the story be different if she had been recruited into another guild on that first day in Harjan? Today, I'm exploring what the story might look like, how major events would pan out, and how the narrative might change. Because most of the original story is focused on Fairy Tail specifically, we won't see many of the arcs that don't feature other guilds. But Fairy Tail is constantly making noise and getting into trouble. So what we do see is more of the tension and rivalry between them and the other guilds. This time from the other side of things. First, we need to decide which guild our alternate universe Lucy joins. The obvious choice for a different guild, in my opinion, would be Mermaid Hill. They're an all-female guild that recruits attractive women. And because one of our first encounters of Lucy involves her trying to charm a shopkeeper into giving her a discount, it makes sense that they might have tried to recruit her. However, I think the most likely guild for her to join is Lamia Scale. The guild headquarters is located south of Harjan, as opposed to Fairy Tail being in Magnolia to the north. So, in terms of how the first episode is set up, this would make the most sense for the story. They have a similar vibe to Fairy Tail, but it's a smaller and less intense group of people, so it would be easy for Lucy to become a core member of the Lamia Scale team. In this alternate universe, Lucy is approached by Jura, who is the most famous member in the guild at the beginning. Jura is impressed by her celestial spirit magic, which she shows off after figuring out the salamander imposter is in fact an imposter. Jura asks Lucy to consider joining Lamia Scale, who are on the lookout for strong and unique mages to add to their ranks in order to improve their standing among the other guilds. Since she's looking for a new home, she happily agrees. The first big event is the Deliora arc. Lucy spots the S-Class quest with the Celestial Spirit Key reward one day while taking a break from training at the guild. We see more Lamia Scale guild members than in the original story, and a couple of them convince Lucy to head out and take on the quest together. Without Gray, they have less knowledge of Deliora, but soon they meet Sherry and her group, and find out what's going on. After defeating them, this is where Fairy Tail's Natsu, Gray, and Erza come in to fight Leon. Lamia Scale and Lucy are reduced to a supporting role in the rest of the arc, much to their frustration. By the end though, Lucy has reached out in friendship to Sherry and the others, convincing them to come back to Lamia Scale. Lucy's outgoing personality is already starting to help Lamia Scale work better as a team, and this is really where it starts to show. On top of that, she ends up being able to get the key for Sagittarius, because the Fairy Tail members weren't interested in the reward, instead only claiming the glory. Next, as the Phantom Lord attack is set up by Lucy's father in order to bring Lucy home, it actually happens against Lamia Scale rather than Fairy Tail. The retaliation is led by Jura and Leon, wanting to protect their guildmaster as well as their pride. They hit back, and just the same as the original, Lucy gets captured. To rescue her, they fight strong opponents, such as Gajil and Juvia. So Lamia Scale has to be more tactical, using less of an all-out offensive strategy than Fairy Tail would have done. For example, Yuka Suzuki's magic cancelling powers come in very useful. Over a long fight, Lamia Scale and Phantom Lord wear each other down to a stalemate. Just as they think that peace has been won, Gajil sneaks in and takes Lucy again, determined to finish the contract with Lucy's father. This time it's the Guildmaster, the very fun old lady, who comes to her rescue, with ever-powerful Jura as backup. The old woman has gotten quite attached to Lucy, given Lucy's poor treatment by her family, and Jura, being a lawful good kind of character, won't stand for Gajil sneaking about after a truce had been called. Since Lamia Scale are generally one of the less problematic guilds, word has gotten out about their fight with Phantom Lord. Once again, Fairy Tail appeared to back them up, with Makarov wanting to stop his old rival Jose from causing too much destruction. With their help, the plot is resolved. In the aftermath, Sherry accompanies Lucy to tell her father that she's leaving the family for good. On the way back, the two of them discuss a mixture of gratitude and resentment towards Fairy Tail. Thankful for the help, but annoyed that they don't think Lamia Scale can deal with things themselves. During the Oracion Seis arc, they work well with the other guilds, and Lucy's resentment towards Fairy Tail slowly begins to mix with respect. Here is where Lucy and Natsu's romantic slow burn would start, as she begins to see him as a strong ally, as well as an irritating rival. Plus, he now acknowledges her skills and strength. Wendy is tempted to join Lamia Scale after forming a friendship with Lucy, but to Lucy's disappointment, she goes with Fairy Tail to be with the other Dragon Slayers. Overall, this does help form stronger bonds between the two guilds, and during the next few quests, we see the members visit each other more often. Then, Fairy Tail's disappearance on Tenro Island hits them hard. Lamia's scale becomes stronger during the 7 years after this disappearance. The guild members start to be more serious, taking on more work to make up for Fairy Tail no longer having that capacity. Lucy, alongside the others, helps to look for the missing Fairy Tail members, and in between, acquires a couple more celestial spirits. She personally wants to become stronger so she can one day find out what happened to them, as she still believes she will see Natsu and Wendy again. We also see a couple of lower stakes quests that show the relationship dynamics between the Lamia scale wizards and how their powers grow over the 7 years. Lucy and Sherry are good friends by this point, having spent enough time together that Sherry doesn't consider her a rival at all, but sees her as family. We learn more of Toby and Yuka's backstories. They have the chance to be more than comical side characters, along with the guildmaster, Oba. And we even get to witness the love blossoming between Sherry and Ren of Blue Pegasus. This is a slower character-based arc before the dramatic return of Fairy Tail. We now come to the Grand Magic Games arc. Lucy wants to participate alongside the others, now that their rivals, Fairy Tail, are back in business. Now, this arc becomes very complicated due to time travel. To refresh your memory, a future version of Rogue comes to trick the Princess of Fiore into opening the Eclipse Gate, in order to bring dragons to the present day. He intends to use them to become powerful enough to kill Acnologia, and become the King of Dragons. As Lucy's celestial spirit magic is needed for the Eclipse Gate to open, she gets kidnapped by the princess during the games. In our version, Oba sends Sherry and Leon to rescue her. As the other guilds wait for the day's event, it's Wendy from Fairy Tail who notices Lucy's disappearance. She was featured in the Lamia scale team before, so worried Wendy asks Toby what happened. Toby explains, and Wendy sneaks off with Natsu following. He can't leave Lucy to suffer without trying to save her. With this combination of Lamia scale and Fairy Tail wizards, the arc unfolds pretty much the same as it does in the original, with the exception being the absence of Loki. Lucy wasn't in Fairy Tail around the time he was about to die, so she couldn't save him. Since all 12 celestial spirits are needed to close the Eclipse Gate and stop the approach of the dragons, this does throw a spanner in the works. For the convenience of storytelling, I would guess some other spirit would take the place of the dead Leo, to keep the zodiac in balance. But either way, it's Lucy and another celestial spirit mage who managed to close the gate, by summoning 12 of the spirits together. By this point, all of the guilds present at the Grand Magic Games are involved in the fight against a few dragons that make it through, and all the dragon slayers together put a stop to future Rogue's evil plan. After all the drama, Fairy Tail won the games. But they try to headhunt Lucy, asking her to join Fairy Tail because of how powerful she ended up being during the crisis. For a moment, she's tempted, looking from Erza to Gray to Wendy's hopeful face, and finally to a grinning Natsu. After a pause, she tells them that Lamia scale are her family, that she wants to grow stronger together with them. Next Grand Magic Games, all of Lamia's scale will be back to give Fairy Tail a run for their money, but in the meantime, she says they're welcome to visit anytime. I think that's as far as I can go with this scenario. It's a lot of fun to speculate about how the story would change just from one detail being different. In this case, it becomes the story of the Underdog Guild, fighting to gain recognition in the shadow of the more infamous Fairy Tail. From rivalry to respect to friendship, I think a show centering around that changing relationship would be very interesting to watch. What do you think though? Let me know in the comments how you think I did.